Alright, so we're going to go ahead and drive our new races in. I've gone ahead and I threw my upper race here in the freezer for a little bit. And we're just going to try to drive it in. The reason I put it in the freezer is to shrink it down. I'm going to use my brass hammer. Again, the brass hammer doesn't bar. And I'm just going to kind of, look at that, work my way around it. Nice and smooth. I'm actually looking, you probably can see from the camera, right here, is there a gap between the race and the frame. So I think that's in all the way. So that feels good. Let me wipe it clean and then we'll do the bottom one the same way. Okay, here's our bottom race right here, fresh out of the freezer. Same drill. Look at that. It's almost going over my fingers. I tell you what, that freezer trick sure does makes things easy. I'm just pushing it with my fingers. This is the part you need to be very, very delicate about. Since I can't really hit it with the hammer anymore, I have to get on the edge of it with the punch and just kind of gently work it in. Kind of working my way across it, kind of catty corner. Ideally, we would have a bearing driver, but again, I understand most guys don't, so we're going to do it in a way that has tools that are accessible to most people. I'm not having to tap it very hard because it's cold. Almost there. I think that's all the way up. I'm just gonna make sure it's seated all the way in there. I think that's in. Alright. Parts. Yeah, it's in there. Getting my thumbnail kind of in between the top of the race edge and the frame, and I don't feel a gap or anything, so it's probably good. We'll go with that. Alright, so we're going to actually pack our bearings now, and here's all the pieces we're going to be using to put the headset back together. Again, our larger inner diameter is going to be our lower bearing, and our smaller inner diameter is going to be the upper bearing. And right now I'm going to show you how to pack bearings. They sell these fancy tools to do this job, but really you don't need anything fancy. You just need your hand and a glove. I was taught this technique by this old school mechanic, and so literally what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking grease and we're going to be forcing it in between this kind of groove here on the bearings. So we're pushing grease in between the rollers, and it'll squish out of here, it'll squish out of the top, all that jazz. So let me just show you. So I don't know if we need to zoom the camera out a little bit, but I'm going to come in here, scoop in some grease just like we would some salsa on the chip, put the bearing in my hand, and I'm literally just going to kind of push the grease into the bearing with the palm of my hand. So it's not, this is it. This is this rocket science technique a lot of people have a hard time with. So, and I'm just going to keep working my way around the bearing until the whole thing's full of grease. I'll just get some more and do both bearings that way. See how we're getting kind of squished out the top there now? That's how we know we got it all full. So you want that little bit of a goo to be coming out on the top side of the bearing here as you work your way all the way around. So, yep, it just takes a few minutes and just kind of keep working the grease. And again, I like to do it with gloves because otherwise you just get your hand full of grease. Alright, so here's our lower triple tree and our fork tube. It's been in the freezer for a few minutes, getting cold. And I'm going to go ahead and put this lower bearing on. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put my bearing shim in. Again, what shim you need to use depends on the bike you're working on. Since we're working on a 360, I know that's the right shim. We're going to put our lower bearing seal on. Again, it's the one with the larger hole. And if you can look, we have a very flat side here, and we have the side with the lip facing up. Lip faces up, just like that. And finally, we have our bearing here. All greased up, ready to go. It goes on, just like that. Something I didn't point out before I started installing the bearing, right here we have basically the cage, which is the metal bent piece with the little rollers in it. Then we have the inner race. It's important that when we're driving this bearing on, we're only hitting on the inner race, because if we hit on the cage, we'll bend it and distort the bearing. So again, the tube you use needs to be sized appropriately, and this one just fits perfect. And then I'm going to use kind of an extension on top of it here, like that, and we'll see if we can get this guy to drive on. There it goes. And I'm checking to see if this is turning or moving at all. I think that's seated. I'm going to give it a couple more wax or good luck, and then we'll be good. And of course, I'm on the vise here, putting pressure just on the bottom of that middle of the triple tree, just something solid to hit against. The cold, this being the freezer again helps. It kind of shrinks the diameter a little bit and makes inserting the bearing a bit easier. I think that's on there. I don't think that's going to go anywhere. That looks good. I can't turn that lower piece right there. All right, let's go ahead and get it installed back on the bike. Okay, well, now we're ready to reassemble on the headset. We've gone and put a layer of grease on the inside of the races here, that are in the headset, and I've also just put a little bit more extra grease on the outside of this lower bearing and on the upper bearing, and so we'll just put it together. The great news about the tapered roller bearings is you don't have to worry about anything falling apart or being dropped like you would with ball bearings. In fact, look at that, it's just staying right in place. Take my upper bearing here. Again, the tapered side faces down. Come on. It's a little stubborn here. That way. Here's my oil seal, dust seal. Just go on that direction. And so now we got the top cap. We're going to go ahead and put the top cap on. I get it threaded down. And this cap is actually what puts the kind of pressure on the bearings. We have to do what we call a preload on the bearing. And what that means is that we're going to tighten the pieces together so much that there's no play in the bearings or slop, but not so much that they're binding. And it's a feel kind of operation. And what I like to do is, since the bearings are brand new, I'm going to go ahead and tighten them up kind of snug and then loosen them a hair, just in case there's any extra slack in here that we missed when we were kind of hammering the pieces on. Tightening them up will help kind of bring things back together. I'm going to use my pin spanner and just snug them up. And I have the triple tree rotated all the way to the right hand side, so it's hitting the frame stop. You can see the pin spanner. It's not really a great tool, but that's how Honda designed it. So that's tight. If you see, I'm really having the struggle to push it. Okay, so that's too tight. Roll back and forth a little bit. I'm going to loosen it up a hair. So it's too loose. Like that's loose. And the front end's going to jiggle and wiggle. it's too tight, it's going to make it hard to turn. So I'm going to go just till I feel it touch right there now. I'm going to give it just a little bit more. Just there, it's probably good. Don't be surprised though if after riding the bike a little bit you have to come in and reset this, because the bearings will take a seat. If there was any slack in the system, it'll kind of work its way out. But the goal is to have it smooth, but with no wiggle play in it. So I think that'll work for us right now. Okay, we'll go ahead and install our upper triple tree. We have our chrome washer, and we have our lock nut here. I'm going to go ahead and call it quits there. I'm not going to really snug this down tight until we have the fork tubes back in, because that'll keep the top and bottoms lined up with each other. Otherwise this guy can kind of rotate around. But so you have to remember to go ahead and tighten that nut down once the fork tubes are in. But that's it. That's how you do the tapered roller bearing install. And once you convert over to this, the bike will give you many years of service without ever having to pop this open again. So it's definitely a good upgrade, and it's going to be a lot smoother when you're going into the turns and such. So anyway, hey, thanks for watching. Again, this is Brendan from Common Motor Collective. That's common-motor.com on the internet.